Let's go right across to Major General G.D. Bakshi for more on this. He's a senior defense analyst. Mr. Major General G.D. Bakshi, my first and foremost question is that with its proven track record in the AFPAC region in the past, the obvious and the most important question is how will this help as far as India's war on terror that's being exported from Pakistan side is concerned? How much of a force multiplier will this really be? Will this, for instance, also empower India to carry out surgical strikes and hit, the terror camps or the launching pads from where these terrorists actually cross over the LOC and come into India?
Most certainly, it will be a much needed force multiplier. The simple fact is, I don't know, for some very strange reason, we went in for UAVs, unarmed vehicles, especially the Israeli Searcher and Heron class drones. But somehow we confined ourselves to the unarmed reconnaissance drones. Whereas the world has entered an absolutely dangerous new era of drone warfare. And we saw that at the highest display in the Azerbaijan-Armenia conflict, when Azerbaijan won that war practically with the help of Israeli and Turkish drones, armed drones, drones that blinked out the tanks, the artillery guns, troop concentrations, devastating impact. The Predator has been used for decades in Afghanistan. Abhi, we have come to it now, der aaye durust aaye, but thank God, this is a HALE, high altitude, long endurance drone, 27 hours endurance, 980, horsepower turboprop engine, and, it can fly up to an altitude of 50,000 feet. It can be controlled even by satellites. That means somebody sitting in the United States can direct strikes onto Afghanistan with deadly accuracy. We've seen the accuracy of this missile. So it does a dual role. For the Navy, it does the role of, search and destroy. In fact, it can scan the Indian Ocean spaces, especially towards our the Bay of Bengal approaches from Malacca, Lombok and Sunda Straits. Right. As also, we are getting 10 each, 10 for the Army, the Air Force and the Navy. The Army and the Air Force can use it to strike terror camps across. We had enunciated a very clear doctrine that, if there is any attack on our territory, any major high casualty terror strike, we would retaliate across. We would not take it on the chin as we have done for 30 years. There was no retaliation after 26/11.
Absolutely.
Now with Uri surgical strike, the special forces went in 3 kilometers, knocked out 40 to 50 terrorists. With that didn't suffice, we sent in 12 Mirages into Balakot, right. 80 kilometers inside, knocked out 300 to 400 terrorists. But then there has been a lull. I don't know why.
Okay.
Once again, we have given a ceasefire at a most inappropriate time. And
perhaps with the recent activity, perhaps many would believe perhaps this could also be something on our agenda. But let me quickly bring in Maruf Raza as well, a group consulting editor of Times Network. Maruf, it's not just the western front, but also the eastern flank where these will play a very, very important role. And perhaps, for a demand that has been made from the Indian side for several years, if I'm not mistaken. Do you think that the recent conflict with China somewhere could have also played a role in this decision, and perhaps this decision of granting India, these 30 Predator drones would also play a significant role when it comes to our eastern borders?
You see, General Bakshi has brought out all the operational statistics which are attributed to this particular type of drone, the Predator, and because of that reason, we are set to be going in for a likely development R&D process where we'll eventually manufacture them at home. Apparently, the Navy was already using 2 of these before the arrival is slated for the other 30, as General Bakshi has brought out 10 per service with Hellfire missiles. So very lethal piece of equipment, could be used with dramatic effect, as was said earlier, to give India over-the-horizon capabilities. But I also want to bring out a couple of questions that are in my mind, and I don't see any clarification coming out from the government on that. You see, a year or two ago, when the US Air Force decided to retire the Predator drones because it was meant to have suffered a lot of casualties, it was said to be the most accident-prone equipment in the US Air Force inventory. Then why have we gone in for that and not the advanced version of the MQ-9 Reaper, which has come into play by General Atomics, the company that makes it, with improvements upon the earlier one? Because the earlier one, apparently, and I'm going by statistics that are available on the internet, had suffered 70 lost in air crashes, 50 lost in operational error, and there were 5 plus 11 lost in combat. So it is not a foolproof piece of equipment, though it flies very high above the ground and has been used to lethal effect repeatedly by the US since 1995. In fact, President Obama's foreign policy was known to be the drone policy, particularly with respect to Afghanistan and Pakistan. So that's one question. And the second, I'd like General Bakshi to wisen us on the fact that while there is a lot of noise being made about this American equipment that is coming to India, apparently the government is completely silent about the S-400 air defense missile systems, which are equally lethal, if not more effective in the kind of combat we could see possibly evolving with China, if at all. And that has begun to arrive in India as per the timelines given by the Russian government and the promises being kept by them, despite all sorts of pressures being applied to us through the American embassy in Delhi and Washington. So right. I am not entirely convinced that this was the best thing that we could buy with our money, certainly far superior to what is there on the ground available to our adversary like Pakistan. And as General Bakshi has rightly brought out, that we could use these for lethal effect on terror camps across the LOC. But my point is that we traditionally have been very picky about equipment that we go out to buy. And we negotiate for years to try and get the best bang for the buck. But why is it that this $3 billion deal has taken place and no noise is made? Air Force apparently was partially reluctant till it was brought on board. No noise is made about this equipment which is retired from the US. So are you giving the US industry a new market here?
Okay. General Bakshi. So a lot of questions coming in there. General Bakshi, your response, please.
Yeah. I think most of it are very pertinent questions. The simple fact is, I'd like to go along with Maroof. The Americans have been rather reluctant to give us cutting-edge equipment. We never got the F-35s. Japan got them. They never offered us nuclear submarines. Australia is getting them. So the fact is that the difference between the Russians and the Americans is the Russians are prepared to give you the very cutting-edge equipment. For some reason, the Americans have always been trying to keep you a generation behind in some kind of a very artificial equivalence with Pakistan. You know, now they've offered you F-16s and F-18s, which are passé aircraft. The only fact is the S-400, I again agree with him, 110% is a far more lethal piece of equipment that will make a very dramatic impact, you know, in the skies over South Asia, especially because our squadron strength is so badly down. But we have the Damocles sword of, you know, the sanctions which the Americans have imposed on Turkey, which they have imposed on China for buying this piece of equipment. So I suppose this PR exercise that you are seeing now on this channel and other channels is to kind of sweeten the blow of India having ignored the threat to sanctions and gone in for what it needs in a very dire fashion. And let's be quite straight about it. You know that the S-400 is far superior to the Patriot. And we have gone in for it. I see this deal more as a sweetener and as an attempt to get the technology for our DRDO, for God's sake, to catch up.
Okay, okay, that's a very important point, a very important point that you made over there. But at the end of the day, Maruf, when we talk about surgical strikes, at the end of the day, we are putting our men out there, we are putting our pilots out there. When it comes to a drone like this, which has a range of about 1,900 kilometers, can go up to a height of about 50,000 feet, at least the human aspect of it and the risk of it is minimized to a large extent. Would you say that when it comes to the kind of strikes that we've seen coming in from the Pakistan side, this would play a very important role in actually hitting back at Pakistan?
See, Madhav, 3 points. Point 1, I've always admired General Bakshi's ability to hit the nail on the head and to call a spade a spade. I was a cadet of his in the academy and have admired his intellect all along. But I want to take this debate a little further. So I'm now going to respond to your question. See, the first thing is, the difference between a hot pursuit action or a commando raid is something that you get the political go-ahead, but you normally, implement it at the level of military commanders. A strategic strike surgical strike has to get the approval of the political leadership of the country. So in both cases, whether post-Uri or post-Pulwama, the government did give the go-ahead, and as General Bakshi earlier brought out, it altered the perception that people had about Pakistan and the myth that because they have nuclear weapons, they'll respond the day you cross their airspace. Now we come to the drones. Now these drones apparently have the ability to operate up to 740 plus kilometers, hover over the area and above the sky, anything from 12 to 24 hours. Normally they say 14, 15 hours is the average, and can identify a target and hit it. Now, the issue is that the Western philosophy of fighting conflicts over the years has evolved in such a way, though they drove it to the dust in Afghanistan, that they didn't want to get their men killed in action. I don't know why they continue to perpetuate to fight a war which was a 2-year war over 10 times over 20 years, and then end up admitting it that they lost it, like General Lloyd Austin did, the current American defense minister, which is called defense secretary there. And now our philosophy is slightly different. We have perhaps the most professionally capable and trained soldiers, airmen, and sailors in the world. I'm making this with consciousness of the fact that there are some armies that might get offended, like the Israelis and the British. But man on man, our chaps are damn good. So we do not need to only wait for some equipment like this to come. And I go back to the earlier point that General Bakshi made, that why has there been a lull since the Balakot strikes in our ability not to continue to punish them again and again. Perhaps it was not for doing the same thing we did with fighter aircrafts. Perhaps it was a wait for the drones. And maybe the drones will see our response mechanism increase.
Well, how will this work? How will this work in terms of our force multiplication? Of course, that's a very big and a very important aspect as well, but certainly will help all our armed forces. For the moment, I'd like to thank both Maruf Raja as well as Major General G.D. Bakshi for joining us with your thoughts on the story. And